Mom, you're 72 years old. You can't just decide to become a social media influencer now. It's embarrassing. Those were the exact words my daughter Rebecca spoke to me over the phone last Tuesday morning, her voice dripping with condescension. I had called her, excited to share my latest project, a YouTube channel where I planned to document my journey learning new technologies and sharing life wisdom with other women my age. I had spent weeks researching, planning, even buying a decent camera with my own pension money, but instead of the support I hoped for, I got judgment. "Rebecca, I'm not trying to embarrass anyone," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the sting of her words. "I just want to try something new, connect with people who might enjoy hearing my stories and experiences." But she cut me off before I could finish explaining my vision. "Listen, Mum, we've talked about this. You need to act your age, all this technology stuff. It's just not for people like you. You barely figured out how to use email properly last year. Now you want to make videos for the internet? What will people think when they see my mother trying to be some kind of influencer?" The way she said the word made it sound like something dirty, shameful. I sat in my kitchen, staring out the window at my garden where I'd successfully grown tomatoes, roses, and herbs for 40 years, where I'd learned to adapt to changing weather patterns, new fertilizers, and different growing techniques. But according to my daughter, I was too old to learn anything new. The conversation continued for another 15 minutes, with Rebecca listing all the reasons why my idea was impractical, inappropriate, and frankly, a bit pathetic for someone your age. Each word felt like a small betrayal. What hurt most wasn't just her lack of support, it was the dismissive tone, as if my dreams and aspirations had an expiration date that had already passed. I had raised 3 children, worked as a librarian for 35 years, learned to use computers when they were introduced to our library system in the 1990s, and successfully navigated every technological change that came my way. But apparently, none of that mattered to Rebecca. In her mind, I had crossed some invisible line where learning and growing were no longer appropriate for someone my age. After hanging up, I called my son Thomas, hoping for a different response. Surely he would understand my excitement about this new venture. Thomas had always been the more supportive of my children, or so I thought. "Hey, Mum," he answered, sounding rushed. "Can I call you back?" I'm in the middle of something, but I could hear laughter in the background, and when I explained why I was calling, the laughter stopped. "Oh, Mom, Rebecca already told me about your YouTube thing." The pause before YouTube thing spoke volumes. "Look, I think it's great that you want to stay active, but maybe you could find something more suitable, like joining a book club or volunteering at the church. This whole internet video thing, it's just not really your generation's strong suit, you know?" The patronizing tone was unmistakable. My own son, whom I had taught to read, helped with countless homework assignments, and supported through his own career changes, was now telling me I was too old to learn something new. He continued, "Plus, think about how it might reflect on us kids. People will see these videos and wonder why we're letting our elderly mother make a fool of herself online." That phrase, "letting our elderly mother," hit me like a physical blow, as if I needed their permission to pursue my own interests. As if being in my 70s meant I had surrendered my autonomy to my adult children. I tried to explain that this wasn't some whim, that I had been researching successful content creators in my age demographic, studying the technical aspects, and even taking notes on storytelling techniques. But Thomas wasn't listening. "Mum, you're being unrealistic. These tech companies, these platforms, they're designed for young people. You'll just frustrate yourself trying to keep up. And honestly, it's a little sad watching older people try to be something they're not." His words stung because they came from a place of such certainty, such absolute conviction, that my age disqualified me from learning or growing. The conversation with Thomas ended much like the one with Rebecca, with me feeling diminished, dismissed, and deeply hurt by the two people whose support I had always counted on. But it was when I called my youngest, Jennifer, that the full extent of their betrayal became clear. Jennifer had always been my ally, my confidant, the child who still called regularly just to chat. Surely she would be different. "Oh, Mom," Jennifer sighed when I told her about my YouTube plans. "I was wondering when you'd bring this up. Rebecca and Thomas have been texting in our group chat about your situation." Group chat. They had a group chat where they discussed my situation like I was some problem to be managed rather than their mother with her own agency and dreams. "What exactly have they been saying?" I asked, though part of me already knew I wouldn't like the answer. Jennifer hesitated, and in that hesitation, I heard confirmation of my worst fears. "Well, they're just concerned, Mum. We all are. This whole YouTube idea, it's just so out of character for you. And honestly, the technical side of it is really complicated. There's video editing, understanding algorithms, building an audience. It's like a full-time job that requires skills that take years to develop." She was using that gentle, patient tone people reserve for explaining things to children or the infirm. But I pressed on. "Jennifer, what exactly did Rebecca and Thomas say in this group chat?" The silence stretched longer this time, and when she finally spoke, her words revealed the full scope of their discussions about me. "They're worried you're having some kind of midlife crisis. Well, not midlife, obviously, but you know what I mean. Like maybe you're feeling isolated since Dad passed, and this is some kind of cry for attention." The casual way she mentioned their theory about my motivations made it clear this wasn't their first conversation about my mental state. My husband Robert had died 3 years ago, and yes, I had been adjusting to life alone. But rather than seeing my YouTube idea as a positive step toward building new connections and purpose, my children had diagnosed it as pathological behavior requiring intervention. Jennifer continued, "Thomas thinks maybe we need to have a family meeting about it. Rebecca suggested we might need to talk to your doctor about, well, about whether this is normal aging or if there might be something else going on." Something else going on. They were questioning my mental competency because I wanted to start a YouTube channel. The betrayal was complete. Not only did they think I was too old to learn new things, but they were pathologizing my desire to try. In their group chat, I had become a problem to be solved rather than a person to be supported. "Are you telling me that my 3 children have been discussing my mental health behind my back because I want to make some videos?" I asked, my voice finally betraying the hurt I felt. Jennifer's response confirmed everything. "It's not like that, Mom. We love you. We just think maybe you're not thinking clearly about this. The internet can be a really harsh place, especially for older people. There are scammers, trolls, people who might take advantage of you. And the technology is constantly changing. What if you invest all this time and money into something you can't actually manage?" Every word was wrapped in concern, but underneath was the same message I'd heard from Rebecca and Thomas. "You're too old, too naive, too incompetent to navigate this modern world." They had appointed themselves my guardians, deciding what was appropriate for me to attempt based solely on my age. The fact that they had been coordinating their response in a group chat made it feel like a calculated campaign rather than genuine concern. "Jennifer," I said carefully, "have any of you considered that I might actually be capable of learning these new skills? That maybe I've done my research and know what I'm getting into?" But even as I asked, I could hear the doubt creeping into my own voice. After 3 consecutive conversations telling me I was being unrealistic, I was starting to question myself. Mum, it's not about capability. It's about being practical. Why put yourself through the stress and potential embarrassment when there are so many other things you could do that would be more appropriate for your stage of life? There was that word again, appropriate. As if there was a manual somewhere that dictated which activities were suitable for 72-year-old widows. The conversation with Jennifer lasted another 20 minutes, during which she revealed more details about their group chat discussions. They had talked about managing Mum's expectations, about redirecting her energy toward more realistic goals, and about the possibility of involving my doctor if I became fixated on the idea. They had reduced me to a case study, a problem requiring careful handling. What made it worse was realizing this group chat had been going on for weeks. Rebecca had first mentioned my YouTube plans to them almost immediately after I told her, and instead of any of them talking to me directly about their concerns, they had been strategizing among themselves about how to discourage me. I was their mother, the woman who had sacrificed countless hours supporting their dreams and ambitions, and they couldn't extend me the basic courtesy of honest, respectful dialogue. After hanging up with Jennifer, I sat in my living room, surrounded by the camera equipment I'd purchased, the notebooks full of content ideas I'd developed, and the research I'd done on successful channels run by older women. Everything I'd worked on suddenly felt foolish, naive. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was too old to learn new things. Maybe this whole idea was just the desperate attempt of a lonely widow to feel relevant again. For the next 3 days, I didn't touch my camera or look at my notes. Every time I walked past my small setup in the spare bedroom, I heard their voices. You're too old. It's embarrassing. Act your age. Impractical. Inappropriate. The words echoed in my head, eroding the confidence I'd built up over weeks of planning and preparation. I started second-guessing every aspect of my idea, wondering if they were right about me being naive about the challenges ahead. On Friday morning, my phone rang. It was Rebecca again. Hi, Mum. I've been thinking about our conversation earlier this week, and I wanted to follow up. Her tone was different, more measured, like she was following a script. Jennifer and Thomas and I have been talking, and we think we have a better solution for you. Here it was, the intervention they'd been planning in their group chat. I braced myself for whatever better solution they had devised for their problematic mother. We know you're feeling lonely since Dad passed, and that's completely understandable. So we've looked into some activities that might be perfect for you. She paused, and I could almost hear her checking her notes. There's a senior center downtown that offers computer classes for beginners. They teach things like email, basic internet use, maybe even Facebook for seniors. Much more appropriate than trying to make professional videos. Professional videos. I had never claimed I was trying to make professional videos. I just wanted to share my stories and connect with other women my age who might appreciate hearing from someone who'd lived through the changes I'd experienced. But in their minds, my simple desire to communicate had become a grandiose delusion requiring correction. Also, Rebecca continued, the church has a new program where seniors can mentor younger people who are struggling with technology. You could help kids with their homework or teach them about life before computers. Wouldn't that be more fulfilling than trying to become some kind of internet personality? Every suggestion felt like a pat on the head, a gentle redirection toward activities they deemed suitable for someone my age. Help others with technology, but don't try to learn it myself. Mentor young people, but don't attempt to create content for my own peers. Stay in my lane, accept my limitations. Be grateful for whatever crumbs of relevance they were willing to throw my way. And Mom, she added, we've made an appointment for you with Dr. Henderson next week. Just a routine checkup, but we thought it might be good for you to talk to someone about how you've been feeling lately. Sometimes grief can make us, well, it can make us want to do things that aren't really like us. There it was, the ultimate infantilization. They had made a doctor's appointment for me without asking, presumably to address what they saw as my concerning behavior. In their minds, wanting to start a YouTube channel at 72 was pathological, a symptom of grief-induced instability that required medical intervention. "Rebecca," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me, "I am not going to that appointment. I am not having a mental health crisis because I want to make some videos. And I am certainly not going to let you three treat me like an incompetent child who can't make her own decisions." The silence on the other end told me she hadn't expected this response. When she finally spoke, her tone had shifted to something I'd never heard from her before. Cold, calculating, manipulative. "Mum, you're not thinking rationally about this. We're trying to help you. But if you're going to be stubborn about it, maybe we need to consider other options." Other options. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. What other options could they consider? Taking legal action to declare me incompetent? Involving adult protective services? The fact that she would even hint at such measures because I wanted to start a YouTube channel revealed how far they were willing to go to control my choices. "What exactly are you suggesting, Rebecca?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "I'm saying that if you continue with this obsession, we might need to have a more serious conversation about your living situation, your finances, your ability to make sound decisions. None of us want it to come to that, but if you're going to insist on embarrassing the family and potentially putting yourself at risk online..." The threat hung in the air between us. My own daughter was essentially saying that if I didn't abandon my YouTube plans, they might try to take away my independence entirely. The woman who had raised her, supported her through college, helped her buy her first house, celebrated every milestone in her life, was now being threatened with loss of autonomy because she wanted to try something new. "You know what, Rebecca?" I said, my voice finding strength I didn't know I still possessed. "You're right about one thing. This conversation has helped me make a very sound decision about my situation." "What do you mean?" she asked, and for the first time in our conversation, she sounded uncertain. "I mean, I'm going to start that YouTube channel. I'm going to learn everything I need to know to make it successful. And I'm going to prove to you, Thomas, Jennifer, and anyone else who thinks I'm too old to learn new things, that age doesn't disqualify someone from growth, creativity, or ambition." The words came out with more conviction than I'd felt in days. Rebecca's response was swift and harsh. "Fine, Mum. If you want to make a fool of yourself online, that's your choice. But don't expect us to support this delusion. Don't expect us to help you when it all falls apart. And don't expect us to pretend it's not embarrassing when people we know see your videos and ask us about our mother's situation." The call ended with Rebecca hanging up on me, but instead of feeling defeated, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, a burning determination to prove them wrong. That afternoon, I sat down with my notebook and began researching everything I could about YouTube success stories, particularly focusing on creators who had started their channels later in life. What I found was inspiring. There were dozens of women over 60 who had built substantial followings by sharing their life experiences, cooking traditional recipes, offering advice on aging gracefully, and yes, even learning and teaching new technologies. I discovered Grandma Betty, who started her cooking channel at 78 and now had over 500,000 subscribers. There was Silver Sisters, run by two women in their late 60s who taught everything from smartphone basics to social media marketing. Retirement Rebel featured a 75-year-old woman who reviewed gadgets and taught other seniors how to stay connected with technology. Each of these channels proved what I already knew deep down, that age doesn't diminish curiosity, creativity, or the ability to learn. As I researched, I took detailed notes on their content strategies, filming techniques, and audience engagement methods. I studied their thumbnails, analyzed their titles, and even watched several videos about video editing software specifically designed to be user-friendly for beginners. What became clear was that while the technical aspects would require learning and practice, they weren't insurmountable challenges. They were simply new skills to be acquired, like any other skill I'd learned throughout my life. That evening, I set up my camera and recorded my first test video. It wasn't perfect. The lighting was inconsistent. I stumbled over a few words, and I had to start over twice when I forgot what I wanted to say. But I did it. I recorded a 5-minute introduction explaining who I was and why I wanted to share my experiences with other women navigating the later chapters of their lives. When I played it back, I didn't see an elderly woman making a fool of herself. I saw someone with stories to tell and wisdom to share. Over the weekend, I dove deeper into learning the technical skills my children assumed I couldn't master. I downloaded editing software and spent hours watching tutorial videos, taking notes, and practicing with short clips. I researched optimal lighting setups using equipment I already had in my house. I learned about audio quality and discovered I could significantly improve my sound by simply recording in my walk-in closet, surrounded by fabric that would dampen echo. Each small success built my confidence. When I figured out how to add text overlays to my videos, I felt the same satisfaction I'd experienced years ago when I learned to use the library's new digital catalog system. When I successfully edited together multiple clips into a coherent narrative, it reminded me of the puzzle-solving skills I'd developed over decades of organizing information for library patrons. These weren't alien concepts that my aging brain couldn't grasp. They were simply new applications of problem-solving abilities I'd been using my entire adult life. Monday morning brought another call from Thomas. "Mum, Rebecca told me about your conversation on Friday. She said you were pretty upset." His tone was conciliatory, as if he were trying to smooth over a misunderstanding rather than acknowledging the fundamental disrespect they'd shown me. "I wasn't upset, Thomas. I was insulted. There's a difference." I kept my voice calm and factual. "Your sister threatened to question my mental competency and potentially interfere with my living situation because I want to start a YouTube channel. That's not concern. That's control." "Come on, Mom. Nobody's trying to control you. We just think this internet thing might be more complicated than you realize. What if you put yourself out there and people are mean to you? What if you accidentally share too much personal information? What if scammers target you?" He rattled off the concerns as if reading from the same list he'd discussed with his sisters. "Thomas," I interrupted, "do you remember when you wanted to start your own landscaping business 15 years ago? Do you remember what everyone told you about how risky it was, how most small businesses fail, how you should stick with your stable job?" He was quiet, clearly remembering those conversations. "Did I discourage you? Did I suggest you might not be mentally stable for wanting to try something new and challenging?" "That's different, Mom. I was in my 30s then. And what? And 30-year-olds are allowed to take risks, learn new skills, and pursue their goals. But 72-year-olds aren't. At what exact age did I lose the right to challenge myself and grow as a person?" The question hung between us, and I could hear him struggling to find an answer that didn't sound as ageist as his initial position. "It's not about age, exactly. It's about being realistic about your limitations." But even as he said it, I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. He was beginning to realize how his arguments sounded when examined closely. What limitations, specifically? My ability to learn, my ability to use technology, my right to make my own decisions about how I spend my time and energy. I pressed him for concrete examples, but he couldn't provide any that weren't based purely on assumptions about what people my age could or couldn't do. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, during which I shared some of what I'd learned over the weekend. I told him about successful, older YouTubers, about the technical skills I'd already begun mastering, about the thorough research I'd done before even buying equipment. By the end of the call, Thomas sounded less certain about his position, but he wasn't ready to admit he'd been wrong. I just don't want you to get hurt, Mom. Emotionally, I mean. What if you put yourself out there and it doesn't work out? This was the first time any of my children had expressed concern about my feelings rather than their own embarrassment. Thomas, I've survived raising 3 children, working in a profession that was constantly evolving, adapting to life as a widow, and countless other challenges that required learning new things and taking emotional risks. If this doesn't work out, I'll survive that too. But I'll never forgive myself if I don't try, because I was afraid of what other people might think. That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. I recorded my first official YouTube video, not a test or practice run, but the actual introduction to my channel that I intended to publish. I titled it, "They Said I'm Too Old to Learn New Things. Watch Me Prove Them Wrong." In the video, I introduced myself as Eleanor Watson, a 72-year-old retired librarian and widow who was tired of being told what she couldn't do because of her age. I spoke directly to the camera, sharing my story about my children's reaction to my YouTube plans and explaining why I believed age shouldn't disqualify someone from learning, growing, and pursuing new interests. I talked about the successful older creators I'd discovered in my research and challenged viewers to think about their own assumptions about aging and capability. The video was 12 minutes long, longer than I'd initially planned, but I had more to say than I'd realized. The editing process took me an entire day. I watched YouTube tutorials, experimented with different cuts, added simple text overlays with key points, and even included a few photos from my younger years to illustrate my points about lifelong learning. When I finally finished, I had created something I was genuinely proud of, a professional-looking video that effectively communicated my message. Before uploading, I spent another day creating my channel branding. I designed a simple logo using free online tools, wrote a compelling channel description, and planned out my first month of content. I researched optimal posting schedules, studied successful thumbnail designs, and even wrote scripts for my next 5 videos. Everything my children had assumed I couldn't learn, I was learning systematically and thoroughly. On Wednesday evening, I uploaded my first video. Within an hour, it had received its first few views and comments. The initial response was overwhelmingly positive. Other older women sharing their own stories of being dismissed because of their age, younger viewers expressing admiration for my determination, and several people requesting specific topics they'd like me to cover. By the end of the first day, the video had reached nearly 100 views, with dozens of encouraging comments. I was so excited by the positive response that I decided to call Jennifer and share the news. Of all my children, she had seemed the least hostile to my plans, and I hoped she might be willing to reconsider her position. But when I told her about the video, her reaction was swift and cold. "Mum, you actually did it? You actually put yourself on the internet like that?" Her tone suggested I had done something shameful rather than something creative and positive. "Yes, I did it, and the response has been wonderful. People are sharing their own stories about overcoming ageism, thanking me for speaking up about these issues. It's exactly the kind of connection I was hoping to create." I was genuinely excited to share this with her, But her next words killed my enthusiasm instantly. "Mum, I need you to take that video down. Today." The demand was stated as if she had authority over my decisions. "Do you realize that anyone can see this? My colleagues, my friends, my kids' teachers. They could all find this video and see my mother talking about family business online." Family business. I hadn't mentioned any of their names in the video or shared private details about our conversations. I had simply talked about the general experience of being told I was too old to learn new things and my determination to prove otherwise. But in Jennifer's mind, even this general discussion constituted a betrayal of family privacy. "Jennifer, I didn't use anyone's name or share private information. I talked about my own experience and my own goals." "Why should I take it down?" I asked, genuinely confused by her reaction. "Because it's embarrassing, Mom. Because people will judge our whole family based on this. Because it makes us look like we don't take care of you properly if you're having to go online to find support and validation." Her concerns were entirely about appearances and reputation, not about my well-being or happiness. But then she said something that revealed the true depth of their planning. "We've all talked about it, and if you don't take the video down, voluntarily, we're going to have to take more serious action. We can't let you continue down this path if you're going to involve the family in your online activities." More serious action. There was that threat again, but now it was coming from Jennifer, whom I had thought was the most reasonable of my children. "What kind of serious action?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "We've been in touch with a lawyer, Mom. About our options if you continue to make decisions that could impact the family or put yourself at risk. There are procedures for when elderly family members start behaving in ways that show poor judgment or potential cognitive decline." The betrayal was complete. Not only had they been discussing my mental health in their group chat, but they had actually consulted a lawyer about potentially having me declared incompetent. The video I was so proud of, the positive responses from viewers, the new skills I'd learned, none of it mattered to them. In their minds, my refusal to accept their limitations on my behavior was evidence of mental decline requiring legal intervention. "Are you telling me that you three have spoken to a lawyer about having your mother declared incompetent because I started a YouTube channel?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "It's not about the YouTube channel specifically, Mom. It's about a pattern of behavior that shows you're not thinking clearly about consequences. The internet thing, refusing to go to the doctor's appointment we arranged, talking about family matters online. It all adds up to someone who might not be capable of making sound decisions anymore." After I hung up with Jennifer, I sat in my living room staring at my phone, processing the full magnitude of what my children had planned. They had consulted a lawyer about having me declared mentally incompetent. They had scheduled a doctor's appointment without my consent to build a case about my mental state. They had been coordinating their strategy for weeks, treating me not as their mother who deserved respect and support, but as a problem to be managed and controlled. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not the explosive, emotional anger that clouds judgment, but the cold, calculated anger that sharpens focus and clarifies purpose. My children had crossed a line from which there could be no return. They had moved beyond simple disagreement with my choices to actively attempting to undermine my autonomy and independence. If they wanted to treat me as incompetent, I would show them exactly how competent I could be. That night, I began documenting everything. I wrote down the exact dates and times of each conversation, recording the specific threats each of them had made about my mental competency, my living situation, and their lawyer consultation. I screenshotted our text message exchanges where they had dismissed my capabilities and made condescending comments about my age. I saved the positive comments and messages I'd received from my first video, creating a record of the supportive community I was building online. Most importantly, I started recording our phone conversations. I researched the recording laws in my state and discovered that as long as one party to the conversation consents, which I did, the recordings would be legally admissible. I wasn't planning to take legal action against my children, but I wanted documentation of their behavior in case they followed through on their threats. The next morning, I uploaded my second video. When your own family tries to silence you, standing up to ageism in all its forms. This video was more personal and more powerful than my first. I talked about what it felt like to have people who were supposed to love and support you instead try to convince you that your dreams were inappropriate, that your age disqualified you from growth and change. I shared some of the positive responses I'd received from my first video and talked about the community of older learners I was discovering online. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, I had dozens of comments from viewers sharing their own stories of family members who had tried to limit their activities and choices based on age. Several other older content creators reached out to welcome me to the community and offer collaboration opportunities. A local news station even contacted me about featuring my story in a segment about older adults embracing new technologies. But it was when I received a direct message from Martha Kowalski, a 78-year-old woman who had started her own successful channel about woodworking, that I realized the full impact of what I was doing. "Eleanor," she wrote, "your videos have given me the courage to stand up to my son, who's been trying to convince me to move into assisted living, even though I'm perfectly capable of caring for myself. Thank you for showing me that I don't have to accept other people's limitations on my life." That message made me understand that this had become about much more than proving my children wrong. I was part of a larger conversation about ageism, about the assumptions people make about older adults' capabilities, and about the right of people at any age to continue growing, learning, and pursuing their interests. My small act of rebellion against my children's expectations had tapped into something much bigger. By the end of the week, my channel had gained over 1,000 subscribers. My videos were being shared in Facebook groups for older adults. Retirement communities were inviting me to speak about embracing technology, and I was receiving interview requests from podcasts focused on successful aging. Everything my children had said was impossible for someone my age was happening, and happening faster than I had ever imagined possible. When Rebecca called on Friday, her tone was different, sharper, more desperate. "Mum, this has gone far enough. You're becoming a public embarrassment to the entire family. My friends are sending me links to your videos, asking if this is really my mother. My boss mentioned seeing an article about you online. This isn't just affecting you anymore. It's affecting all of us." "Rebecca," I replied calmly, "my success isn't about you. My videos aren't about you. My life choices don't require your approval or permission. I'm 72 years old, and I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions about how I want to spend my remaining years." "Mum, we're serious about taking action. The lawyer said we have grounds for a competency hearing based on your recent behavior patterns. Don't make us do this." The threat was no longer subtle. They were demanding I abandon my newfound success and return to the narrow life they deemed appropriate for someone my age, or they would try to have me declared legally incompetent. That's when I made the decision that would end our relationship permanently. "Rebecca," I said, "I want you to listen very carefully. I am not stopping my YouTube channel. I am not limiting my activities to what you consider age-appropriate. I am not submitting to your attempts to control my choices. And if you follow through on your threat to challenge my competency, I will use every resource at my disposal to fight you." "What resources could you possibly have, Mom?" Her tone was mocking, dismissive. She still saw me as a helpless elderly woman who could be intimidated into compliance. "Well," I said, "for starters, I have detailed documentation of every conversation where you and your siblings have threatened me. I have recordings of our phone calls where you've discussed consulting lawyers and questioning my mental health. I have evidence of the supportive community I've built and the positive impact I'm having on other people's lives. And I have a growing platform where I can share my story about how adult children sometimes try to control their aging parents through intimidation and threats. The silence on the other end told me she was beginning to understand that I wasn't the powerless victim they had assumed I was. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold, with barely contained rage. If you make any of our private conversations public, if you mention us by name in your videos, we will sue you for defamation and invasion of privacy. Then I guess we understand each other perfectly, I replied. You leave me alone to live my life as I choose, and I'll continue making videos about ageism and empowerment without mentioning any names. But if you follow through on your threats to have me declared incompetent, all bets are off. The confrontation with Rebecca marked the end of our relationship as I had known it. Over the following weeks, none of my children called or visited. I learned through mutual acquaintances that they were telling people I was going through a difficult phase and that they were concerned about my mental state. They had crafted a narrative that positioned them as the long-suffering adult children of a problematic mother, rather than acknowledging their own role in trying to control and diminish me. But while I was losing my relationship with my children, I was gaining something much more valuable, a sense of purpose and community I hadn't felt in years. My YouTube channel continued to grow steadily. I was averaging several thousand views per video and had built an engaged subscriber base of people who genuinely appreciated my content. I created series about learning new technologies, adapting to life as a widow, and maintaining independence as you age. Each video brought new stories from viewers who were facing similar challenges with family members who underestimated their capabilities. 6 months after starting my channel, I reached a milestone I never could have imagined when this journey began: 50,000 subscribers. The achievement video I made to celebrate was titled, "What I've Learned in My First 6 Months as a Senior YouTuber." In it, I reflected on the technical skills I'd mastered, the community I'd built, and the personal growth I'd experienced. I talked about the irony that my children's attempt to discourage me from learning new things had actually motivated me to learn more than I might have otherwise. The video attracted attention from mainstream media outlets. I was featured in articles about successful older entrepreneurs, invited to speak at conferences about aging and technology, and even offered a book deal to write about my experiences. Everything my children had said was impossible for someone my age was not only possible, but happening in ways that exceeded my original goals. 1 year after they had told me I was too old to learn new things, I was running a successful YouTube channel, had written a book proposal, was speaking regularly at events, and had built a nationwide network of friends and colleagues in the content creation community. I had learned video editing, social media marketing, public speaking techniques, and business management skills. I had proven not just to them, but to myself, that age is not a barrier to learning, growing, and achieving new goals. The financial success surprised me most of all. What had started as a personal project to prove a point had generated enough revenue through sponsorships, affiliate marketing, and speaking engagements that I was earning more money than I had expected to see again after retirement. I was able to upgrade my equipment, hire an assistant to help with scheduling and correspondence, and even set aside money for travel to visit some of the viewers who had become genuine friends. More importantly, I had discovered that my voice mattered to people beyond my immediate circle. The messages I received from viewers weren't just polite encouragement. They were heartfelt testimonials about how my videos had changed their perspectives on aging, encouraged them to pursue their own delayed dreams, or given them courage to stand up to family members who were trying to limit their choices. I realized I had accidentally stumbled into advocacy work that was making a real difference in people's lives. It was around this time that Thomas reached out for the first time since our confrontation. He called on a Thursday afternoon, and his voice was subdued, uncertain. "Mum, I've been watching your videos," he said, without preamble. "I wanted to call and, well, I wanted to apologize." The apology caught me off guard. Of my 3 children, Thomas had always been the most stubborn about admitting when he was wrong. "What specifically are you apologizing for, Thomas?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective on what had happened between us. "For everything, really. For assuming you couldn't learn new things. For talking about you behind your back in that group chat. For going along with Rebecca's ideas about questioning your mental competency. For not supporting you when you were excited about trying something new." He paused, and I could hear the genuine regret in his voice. "I watched your video about family members trying to silence older adults, and I realized that's exactly what we did to you." The conversation that followed was unlike any we had ever had. Thomas explained that seeing my success had forced him to confront his own assumptions about aging and capability. He admitted that their concerns had been more about their own embarrassment than my well-being, and that they had convinced themselves they were protecting me when they were actually trying to control me. He talked about how uncomfortable it had been to watch me prove every one of their predictions wrong, and how that discomfort had gradually shifted into genuine admiration for what I had accomplished. "The thing is, Mom," he said toward the end of our conversation, "you didn't just prove us wrong about YouTube. You proved us wrong about what it means to age successfully. I always thought getting older meant accepting limitations and narrowing your world. But you've shown that it can mean expanding your world, finding new purposes, connecting with new people. I'm actually inspired by what you've done, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." That conversation with Thomas opened the door to rebuilding our relationship on new terms. He became a regular viewer of my channel, occasionally helping with technical issues when I traveled, and even appeared as a guest in a video about repairing relationships damaged by ageist assumptions. His willingness to acknowledge his mistakes publicly in that video meant more to me than any private apology could have. Jennifer never apologized, but she did eventually stop making hostile comments about my channel. I learned through Thomas that she continued to find my online presence embarrassing, but had given up trying to convince me to stop. She attended family gatherings when I was invited, but maintained a cool distance, treating me politely but without warmth. Our relationship settled into a cordial detachment that was probably the best outcome I could have hoped for, given how deep the betrayal had been. Rebecca, however, doubled down on her position. Not only did she refuse to apologize, but she actively tried to discredit my success to other family members and mutual friends. She continued to describe my YouTube channel as evidence of poor judgment and claimed that my online activities were not normal behavior for someone her age. When my book was published and became a bestseller in the aging and self-improvement categories, she told people I must have hired a ghostwriter because there's no way someone her age could understand modern publishing. Her persistent attempts to undermine my achievements eventually backfired. Family members and friends who had initially been swayed by her narrative began to see through her jealousy and resentment. When I was featured on the cover of a national magazine as an example of successful aging, when I was invited to give a TED Talk about overcoming ageism, when I was recognized by AARP as one of their 50 over 50 award recipients, Rebecca's claims became increasingly ridiculous to anyone paying attention. The final break with Rebecca came when she made the mistake of posting negative comments about me on social media, using her real name and identifying herself as my daughter. Several of my viewers recognized her and shared screenshots of her comments, which were cruel and personal attacks on my character and mental state. The backlash was swift and severe. Hundreds of people responded to defend me and criticize her behavior toward her own mother. Rather than apologizing or taking down the posts, Rebecca blamed me for turning strangers against my own family. She sent me a scathing email accusing me of manipulating people online and claiming that my success was built on lies and exaggeration. The email was so bitter and hateful that I realized our relationship was irreparably damaged. I blocked her number, unfriended her on social media, and instructed my assistant to screen any messages or calls from her. Looking back now, 3 years after this all began, I realized that learning how to block Rebecca's number was indeed one of the most important new skills I acquired. Not because of the technical challenge, though figuring out my smartphone's call blocking feature was more complicated than you might expect, but because of what it represented. It was the moment I fully accepted that protecting my peace and happiness sometimes requires cutting ties with people who are determined to diminish you, even when those people are family. The success of my YouTube channel led to opportunities I never could have imagined when I first picked up that camera. I've traveled across the country, speaking at conferences, written 2 books, been featured in documentaries about successful aging, and built a business that employs 3 people. I've proven to myself and others that 72 is not too old to start a new career, learn challenging technical skills, or build something meaningful from scratch. More importantly, I've discovered that age brings advantages in content creation that younger people don't have. My life experience gives me perspective that resonates with viewers. My willingness to be vulnerable about challenges and failures creates authentic connections. My freedom from caring about what others think, a freedom that came hard-won through this experience with my children, allows me to take creative risks that produce better content. Today, when people ask me what I've learned from becoming a successful content creator at 75, I tell them that the most important lesson wasn't about technology or business, or even about proving age-related stereotypes wrong. It was about recognizing that the people who claim to have your best interests at heart are sometimes the ones holding you back from discovering what you're truly capable of achieving. I still miss the relationship I thought I had with my children, especially during holidays and family milestones. But I don't miss the version of myself who allowed other people's limited imagination to define what was possible for my life. When my children told me I was too old to learn new things, they were really telling me I was too old to surprise them, too old to exceed their expectations, too old to become someone they hadn't already categorized and dismissed. They were wrong about me then, and they would be wrong about me now. At 75, I'm still learning new things, still growing, still discovering capabilities I didn't know I possessed. And yes, I've become quite proficient at blocking numbers, both literally and metaphorically. Sometimes the most important new skill you can learn is knowing which voices deserve your attention and which ones deserve nothing more than digital silence.